part of the Press Play Podcast Network.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Full 40 College Basketball Podcast on the Press Play Podcast Network. I am your host, Ben Billman, and we are finally to the tournament. It is finally March Madness. The tournament starts tomorrow, and I could not be more excited for this bracket. I think the selection committee did a really nice job. I think the only change I would have made is Virginia getting in. I would have left them out, and I would have put in either Oklahoma, St. John's, or Indiana State. I think one of those teams probably deserved it over Virginia, and we saw last night in the first play-in game night that Virginia was just not up to terms with Colorado State. They only had 14 points at halftime. They went over 10 minutes in game time without scoring a point. And so I would have left Virginia out personally and put someone in their place. But other than that, I think the committee did a nice job both with selecting teams, also with seeding, and where they placed them in the bracket. So I really have no qualms with anything that the committee did other than maybe putting Virginia in. But in this episode, I'm going to run through my bracket, who my picks are, and in the first half today, we're going to run through the first round, and in the second half, we're going to go through the second round all the way to the national champion. I'll try to touch a little bit on some of these games. I'm not going to go into great deal on some of them based on the matchup, but I think it's going to be a wild tournament with lots of upsets, and really there don't seem to be any guarantees in this tournament overall when it comes to matchups and seeding. All right, so I'm going to start in the East region. This region will play the regional semifinals and finals in Boston, and Connecticut is the number one seed in the East. There's no surprise there. I believe Connecticut will beat the number 16 seed Stetson. That should not be much of a problem. The first 50-50 toss-up game, in my opinion, is number 8 Florida Atlantic versus number 9 Northwestern. If you remember back to last year in the first round, Florida Atlantic was also in this 8-9 matchup and barely beat Memphis. It took shot near the end of the game to win that. I think Northwestern is battle-proven, battle-tough through the Big Ten, and Boo Buie is one of the best guards in the nation. I'm going to go with number 9 Northwestern. In the 5-12 matchup, San Diego State, UAB, I'm going to go with number 12 UAB. I think Andy Kennedy is a great coach. UAB has been coming on hot late, and I think San Diego State is going to fold after last year's run to the national championship game. I have the 4 seed Auburn beating Yale. I think Yale's a great team out of the Ivy League, but I think Auburn's defense wins out there. Number 6 BYU, I have them beating number 11 Duquesne. Duquesne had an amazing run to the A-10 championship, but I think BYU's three-point shooting will push them over the top in that game. I have number 3 Illinois over number 14 Morehead State. Terrence Shannon Jr., this is his chance to really become a household name in this tournament after winning the Big Ten tournament. Number 7 Washington State versus number 10 Drake. I'm going to go with number 10 Drake. They just beat Indiana State in the Missouri Valley Championship, and I think they could be a bracket buster moving forward in the bracket. And then finally in the East, I have number 2 Iowa State beating number 15 South Dakota State. Iowa State is coming off the Big 12 championship and looks like they could make a deep run in March. Moving down to the Western region, in the West, the regional will be played in Los Angeles for the regional semifinals and finals, and North Carolina is the number 1 seed. They will play the play-in winner Wagner in the first round, and I think this will be a breeze for RJ Davis in the first round. Number 1 North Carolina moves through easily. Another toss-up game, number 8 Mississippi State, number 9 Michigan State. I've got to go with Tom Izzo and the Spartans. I know they have not played super great this season, but Izzo, give him 4 days to prepare and scout and process what needs to be done for a game plan, and he's very difficult to beat, so I'm going to take number 9 Michigan State to advance. St. Mary's the 5 versus Grand Canyon the 12. I think Bryce Drew has done an amazing job at Grand Canyon, but they got a very bad matchup here with a St. Mary's team that won the West Coast Conference regular season and conference tournament and has one of the best defenses in the country. I will go with St. Mary's. My first major upset of the tournament is number 13 Charleston over number 4 Alabama. The Crimson Tide have a great offensive team, but they struggle mightily on defense. Charleston plays up-tempo, shoots a lot of threes. I think this is the year Charleston breaks through and gets to the second round. New Mexico, the 11 seed, I have them beating the 6 seed Clemson. New Mexico is coming off a conference championship in the Mountain West in the tournament, and Clemson has been struggling mightily over the last few weeks. Give me New Mexico. Baylor, I believe, will beat Colgate, the 3 over the 14. Scott Drew continues to have his team near the top, and I think they roll through the first round. In a mini upset, if you can call it that, I have number 10 Nevada over number 7 Dayton. Dayton has struggled down the stretch, and I think Steve Alford has Nevada, the Wolfpack, playing very well right now heading into the first round. And then finally, number 2 Arizona over number 15 Long Beach State. Arizona redeems themselves after losing in the first round last year as a 2 seed. They beat Long Beach State. And one of the most interesting stories of this tournament is Dan Monson, who was basically fired as the head coach of Long Beach State heading into the conference tournament. They asked him if he would coach through the conference tournament, and they agreed mutually that that would be the case. Well, come to find out, Dan Monson leads Long Beach State to the conference tournament championship, and now they are in the tournament playing Arizona. Win or lose, Dan Monson knows that he is going to be out as head coach, but it's fairly crazy that he was able to win the conference tournament and now finds himself in March Madness. Even though that's an amazing story, and I feel great for Dan Monson for winning that, I still think that they lose to Arizona in the first round. Moving over to the South region, which will have its regionals in Dallas. The South region, the number 1 seed there is Houston. Houston plays Longwood in the first round, and I believe this might be the biggest margin of victory in the first round. I think Houston crushes Longwood and makes up for that conference final loss to Iowa State where they got crushed. They need a good game early to get back on track, and I think they take that out on Longwood in the first round in the South region. Nebraska versus Texas A&M in the 8-9 matchup. Both of these teams have their strengths. Both of these teams have their weaknesses. I'm going to pick Nebraska, who will win their first tournament game in the history of the tournament. And Fred Hoiberg leads Nebraska after being so great at Iowa State, then going to the NBA, and now back at Nebraska. He gets the win over a very tough Buzz Williams coached Texas A&M. My second 12 over 5 upset is James Madison over Wisconsin. Wisconsin went through a dip during the season. They did turn it on and actually beat Purdue in the Big Ten semifinals, but I think they are a very streaky team, and they probably used up everything they had in the Big Ten tournament when they lost to Illinois in the championship. Give me a James Madison team that is 31-3 and looks like they could potentially make it out of the first weekend if they play well. The number 4 seed Duke, I have them beating the number 13 seed Vermont. I think Filipowski and that team is just too big and strong. But Vermont is a perennial tournament team. They've proven in the past that they could challenge anybody, but I think Duke is a little bit too strong for them this year. The number 6 versus the number 11, Texas Tech versus NC State. I will choose NC State, who is coming off an ACC tournament championship. They would not have gotten in if it weren't for that championship, but along the way they beat Duke, they beat Virginia, they beat North Carolina. I think winning those 3 games proves to me that they have what it takes to win over a team like Texas Tech, who has been fairly streaky in a very tough Big 12. I will choose Kentucky over Oakland, the 3 over the number 14 seed. Kentucky can shoot the ball very well, one of the best guard rotations in the country, and they are a scary team right now with how well they are playing. In the number 7 versus 10 matchup, Colorado plays Boise State in a play-in game. I think Colorado wins that. But no matter who wins, Colorado or Boise State, I think either one is going to beat Florida. Florida is hampered by injuries right now. Their big man went down with a broken leg in the conference championship. I think that affects them psychologically, and they're going to lose to the winner of Colorado or Boise State. I think Colorado will win that game, but even if they don't, I will still choose Boise State over Florida. And then to finish things off in the South, I have Marquette beating Western Kentucky. Whether Tyler Kolek is fully healthy or not, Marquette has enough talent to get through that game, even if Tyler Kolek is not able to play at all. All right, moving down to the Midwest. Purdue, the number 1 seed in the Midwest. This regional will take place in Detroit. So pretty convenient for Purdue overall. And they also get to play their first round and second round in Indianapolis, just down the road from Purdue's campus. So very convenient for them. I think they will cruise by the winner of the 16 game, Grambling or Montana State. That game is being played tonight. And Purdue will have no trouble getting through the first round this year after losing in the first round last year to Fairleigh Dickinson. And that will take a little bit of the pressure off their shoulders just by getting through the first round. One of the toughest and closest first round matchups, in my opinion, is the number 8 seed Utah State against the number 9 seed TCU. Now, overall, I think Utah State is underseeded. I think they probably should have been a 6 or a 7 seed, but they're an 8 here. And TCU, a team that, again, has been fairly uneven and streaky in the Big 12, but a very tough Big 12. This game is going to come down to the wire. I wouldn't be surprised if the team with the ball last is the one that wins. It's going to be a one-possession game, in my opinion, and I think Utah State, the number 8 seed, sneaks by and gets to the second round. In the number 5 versus number 12 matchup, Gonzaga versus McNeese. Gonzaga has been down a little bit this year, and it was a question leading into the tournament whether they would even get in. But come to find out, they have a 5 seed, and they look pretty solid at the end of the year. On the other hand, McNeese finishes 30-3 on the year. Will Wade has turned this team around in his first year at McNeese. I think this could be a very close game, but I think Mark Few and a steady guard position at Gonzaga is going to lead them by a very hungry and upset-minded McNeese team at the number 12. So I have Gonzaga moving on. In the 4-13 matchup, Kansas versus Samford. Kansas is going through a lot of injuries right now. Will Hunter Dickinson be fully healthy? It came out earlier today that McCullers will not play in the tournament. There's a lot of uncertainty around this team right now, and I think Samford, the 13 seed, picks them off in the first round. So I will have the 13 over the 4. Samford takes the win there. In the bottom of the Midwest, South Carolina versus Oregon. The number 6 versus number 11. South Carolina likes to win in hard-fought, rough games, and Oregon has been coming on as of late, winning the Pac-12 championship. They were another bid stealer that if they had not won the Pac-12 title, they would not have gotten in. So Oregon is hot right now. I think Dana Altman always has his teams playing well in March, and I will take Oregon in the upset, the 11 over the 6. That should be a great game, though. The number 3 seed Creighton versus the number 14 seed Akron. Akron is another team that seems to get in the tournament almost every year and plays very well in the first round, but I think the starting lineup and the depth of Creighton is just too great. They shoot the ball too well. They play very good defense, and so I'm going to take number 3 Creighton to knock out number 14 Akron. In last night's play-in game, Colorado State defeated Virginia in a fairly lopsided game, so they move into a matchup against number 7 Texas, and Colorado State is the 10 seed. And even though Colorado State looked good last night, they run into a Texas team where Max Abmas is the leader of that team. You might remember a couple years ago, Max Abmas with Oral Roberts getting them to the Sweet 16 as a 15 seed. He is now on a Texas team that plays well in transition, shoots the ball well, and again, in a very tough Big 12, they held their own. And so I will take Texas to beat Colorado State. But congratulations to Colorado State on getting the victory last night. And then finally, to finish out the first round, Tennessee against St. Peter's, the 2 versus the 15. Again, St. Peter's just 2 years ago made the run as a 15 seed to the Elite Eight, but this team is completely different. Shaheen Holloway is no longer the coach. He is now the coach at Seton Hall. Most of the roster has moved on, and this is a completely different team. Tennessee is coming off a pretty ugly loss in the SEC tournament. And so similar to Houston, who lost pretty poorly in the Big 12, I think Tennessee takes out their frustration and gets back on track by beating St. Peter's in what could be a pretty ugly game overall. Okay, so looking back at the first round, all my 1s, all my 2s, and all my number 3 seeds, I have all advancing through the first round with not many problems. I do have 2 13 over 4s with Charleston and Samford getting through. I also have 2 12s over 5s with UAB and James Madison getting through. I have 3 11 seeds winning, North Carolina State, Oregon, and New Mexico. I have Drake and Nevada as 10 seeds getting through, and then Northwestern and Michigan State as 9 seeds. So those are all my lower seeds that I have getting through to the second round. All right, we're going to take a quick break, and when I come back, I'm going to finish off my bracket going from the second round all the way to my national champion. I will be right back.
Hi, everybody. It's John Tellage from the Guardians of the Land MLB podcast. Be sure to hop on with us to follow all the dramatic developments of the reigning American League Central Division champions. From game analysis to interviews to keeping tabs on who could be the next breakout star. We'll have that and much, much more right here. It's the Guardians of the Land MLB podcast on the Press Play Podcast Network. Subscribe here and join the fun.
Hey everybody, it's Sam Amico from Cavs on the Break NBA podcast. Be sure to give us a listen for all your Cleveland Cavaliers recaps, analysis, breakdowns, draft talk, free agency. The list goes on and on. Give us a listen, Cavs on the Break NBA podcast.
Welcome back to the second half of the Full 40 College Basketball Podcast on the Press Play Podcast Network. Well, in the first half, I went through my first round victories and who I think will come through in the first round. And for the second half, let's go through who I have winning in the second round all the way to my national champion. So starting back in the East, in the second round, I have number 1 UConn versus number 9 Northwestern. I think Connecticut is just too strong for this Northwestern team. Chris Collins has done a great job getting Northwestern to a position where they are a contender every year in the Big Ten, but they're running into a juggernaut, and I have UConn advancing to the Sweet 16 as the number 1 seed in the East. I had UAB, number 12, against number 4 Auburn. Bruce Pearl has this team playing very well at the right time. They won the SEC tournament, and they roll over UAB, an in-state matchup to get to the Sweet 16. Staying in the East, I have Illinois, the 3 seed, beating BYU, the 6 seed. BYU did great in their first season in the Big 12, but Terrence Shannon is too strong of a player, and number 3 Illinois advances to the Sweet 16. And then finally, I wanted to pick number 10 Drake over number 2 Iowa State, but Iowa State is too hot right now. They played too well down the stretch to win the Big 12 title. They crushed Houston in the Big 12 championship, and I think Iowa State will beat Drake in what could be a great game, and it wouldn't surprise me to see the Cinderella Drake make it to the second weekend. I just think they got a bad draw and ran into too good of a team in the Cyclones. Moving down to the West region in the second round, North Carolina versus Michigan State, two of the most classic, well-known teams in the history of college basketball. I'm going to go with North Carolina, the number 1 seed. I think the guard play of North Carolina is going to carry them through, and Michigan State has been too up and down this season to advance them any further, even though Tom Izzo has done a pretty good job of maintaining balance on this team throughout the year, even when they were struggling. So North Carolina to the Sweet 16. St. Mary's, the 5 seed, against the upset-minded Charleston Cougars, the number 13 seed. Along with Drake, I think Charleston could be a Cinderella sleeper in this tournament, but St. Mary's has played too well all season. They're on too much of a hot streak, and I think St. Mary's moves on to the Sweet 16 as the 5 seed. Moving down to the bottom of the West, New Mexico versus Baylor. I think New Mexico's dream run comes to an end in this game. Richard Pitino did a great job getting his team to the tournament after looking like they wouldn't get there, but they did win the Mountain West Conference, but Scott Drew and Baylor will move on to the Sweet 16 as the 3 seed. And in the biggest upset of the second round, Steve Alford and the Nevada Wolfpack will take down Arizona, the 10 over the 2. Nevada has looked very good all season. Arizona played in a very weak Pac-12 conference, and I think that will come back to bite them when they start going up against real challenges. They will lose to Nevada in the second round. Moving across the bracket to the South region, Houston will take out Nebraska. I think Nebraska will show well in the second round, but Houston, again, after the complete downfall in the Big 12 championship, They take out their frustration on Nebraska. They play great defense, and I think they shut down a very balanced but overmatched Nebraska team to get to the Sweet 16. The other Cinderella of the tournament, number 12 JMU, will take on number 4 Duke. I do think James Madison has played great all season, but this is where their run ends, running up against a Duke team which has just too much talent and is playing too well at the right time of the season. And I think Duke moves on as a number 4 seed to the Sweet 16. In the 3-11 matchup, NC State, their run comes to an end after an amazing week last week in the ACC tournament. Kentucky's guard play and Reed Shepherd and Rob Dillingham just are too much for NC State to handle. And Kentucky, again, one of the best teams heading into the tournament, advances and moves on to the second weekend and the Sweet 16. And in another 10-2 upset, I have Colorado winning the play-in game tonight over Boise State. I have Colorado beating Florida, and I think they move on to win against the 2 seed Marquette to advance to the Sweet 16. Colorado has gotten hot at the right time of the season. They finished the regular season on a nice winning streak. They made it all the way to the Pac-12 championship before losing to a desperate Oregon team. I think Colorado is a team to watch out for, and they will take down the second-seeded Marquette and advance to the Sweet 16 in the South region. All right, moving down to the Midwest region. Number 2 Purdue against number 8 Utah State. This is the game where Zach Edey really proves why he is the 2-time National Player of the Year. I think he has an incredible game. The guard play is solid enough for Purdue that they get by a very stingy and a very competitive Utah State in what I think could be a good game, but Edey down the stretch will just be too difficult to overcome for Utah State. In the 5-13 matchup, Gonzaga versus one of the biggest upsets in the first round, number 13 Samford. I think Samford plays a very exciting style of ball where they play a lot of players with a lot of time and stay very energized and fresh throughout the game. But Mark Few continues to excel in the tournament and gets Gonzaga to another Sweet 16. Again, this is a season that I don't think a lot of people expected from them, but they return right where they always are with a rematch or revisit to the Sweet 16. Number 11, Oregon, one of the hottest teams in the country, but their run is going to come to an end against a Creighton Blue Jays team, which last year was a possession away from making it to the Final Four. They get back to the Sweet 16. They look like they have another team, which is going to be a second weekend team or beyond. And so Creighton wins, and congratulations to Oregon winning the Pac-12, winning a game in the tournament, but going down to Creighton, the number 3 seed. And then finally, to finish out the second round, I have Tennessee, the 2 seed, over number 7 Texas. Tennessee has played too well all season. They did have a few bumps in the road against Kentucky and then Mississippi State in the quarterfinals of the SEC tournament, but Dalton Knecht really turns it on against Texas, takes over that game, and Tennessee advances to the Sweet 16 for the second year in a row with the win over number 7 Texas. Moving on to the Sweet 16. Now we get down to the nitty-gritty of the tournament. We'll move back to the East bracket, the East region, where I went with chalk, the 1 UConn, the 2 Iowa State, the 3 Illinois, and the 4 Auburn, 1 through 4 in the Sweet 16. The first matchup there, UConn versus Auburn. Again, UConn is trying to be the first repeat national champion since Florida in 2006 and 2007. And Auburn is trying to get back to the Final Four for the first time since 2019. I think Bruce Pearl will have his team ready to play. I think they match up pretty good against UConn overall, but I think UConn talent-wise is just a little bit better at every position, and I also think the experience of having won the national title last year is going to carry UConn to the Elite Eight, and this could be, though, a potential upset game, but I have Connecticut in my Elite Eight. Moving down to the bottom of the East, number 3 Illinois versus number 2 Iowa State. If Terrence Shannon can get hot for the Illini, then I could potentially see this as a mini upset with the 3 beating the 2. But again, Iowa State over the last few weeks has been the hottest team in the country, and they swept through the Big 12 tournament. I think they win another game and gets Iowa State a step closer to the Final Four by beating Illinois, and the number 2 Iowa State gets to the Elite Eight, where they will take on UConn in the Eastern Regional Final. Moving down to the West and the Sweet 16, my first number 1 seed to fall will be North Carolina. R.J. Davis, Armando Bacot, and company will go down to the St. Mary's Gales, the number 5 seed in the Sweet 16. St. Mary's has looked great all season. They play a very balanced attack, and they have some of the best guard play in the country. St. Mary's has never advanced past the Sweet 16, but I think this year they're going to destroy North Carolina with their defense and hit just enough three-pointers to push them over the top, and St. Mary's for the first time moves on to the Elite Eight, the 5 over the 1. And in the bottom of the bracket, I have another upset with the Nevada Wolfpack, the 10 seed, taking down the number 3 seed Baylor Bears. I think Steve Alford has this team playing great basketball, and I look back at last year with San Diego State coming out of the Mountain West to advance far in the bracket. I think the Mountain West has another team that does that this year, and that is the Nevada Wolfpack. I have them beating Baylor in the Sweet 16. Another great game, or another great season for Scott Drew and the Baylor Bears, but in one of the biggest upsets in the second weekend of the tournament, I have Nevada, the 10 seed, advancing to the Elite Eight. Moving up to the South region in the Sweet 16, Houston versus Duke. Houston has played too great all season to lose to a Duke team that I don't think can match the toughness of the Cougars. Kelvin Sampson has one of the toughest teams in the country. They play very physical basketball. They rebound the ball exceptionally well. And overall, I think they're just too good and too well disciplined for a Duke team that has struggled against physical teams all season. I think Houston, the number 1 seed, advances to the South Championship, to the Elite Eight. And then on the other side of the bracket in the South, number 3 Kentucky against number 10 Colorado. I'm going to go with the Kentucky Wildcats. Again, the shooting, the guard play, the overall ability of them to stretch the floor and go deep into their bench, I think is very important. And John Calipari continues to make a run with a team with multiple NBA prospects and goes to the Elite Eight, where they will await Houston, the 1 seed, against Kentucky, the 3 seed. Moving down to the Midwest region, Purdue versus Gonzaga, the 1 versus the 5. Mark Few has done an exceptional job getting his team to this point in a season after a bunch of question marks mid-season and late in the year. The win over Kentucky at Kentucky pushed Gonzaga into this point to get that 5 seed, but they just do not have anybody that can match up with Zach Edey. Again, Purdue rolls into the Elite Eight. I don't think this game is very close. Purdue just too deep and too tough. They take down Gonzaga in a fairly lopsided Sweet 16 matchup. And then in the bottom of the Midwest region, I think Tennessee takes a step closer to the Final Four by beating Creighton. Creighton has done a good job. Coach McDermott has had this team in position to compete for a Final Four all season, but I think they fall short against one of the best defenses in the country in Tennessee, and Rick Barnes advances to the Elite Eight with the Tennessee Volunteers. So in review, I have 3 of the 4 number 1 seeds advancing to the Elite Eight, with North Carolina the only one out. I have 2 of my number 2 seeds, Iowa State and Tennessee. I have a number 3 seed in Kentucky, a number 5 seed in St. Mary's, and a number 10 seed in Nevada. So in the East Regional Final in the Elite Eight, I have UConn, the defending national champion, against Iowa State, the reigning Big 12 champion. This game could go either way. I really do think it's going to come down to the final possession. But I think Connecticut, the defending national champion, again, will use that experience and continue to roll. Dan Hurley has the best team in the country, the most balanced team in the country, and I think Donovan Clingan in this game, the big man for UConn, really dominates, and UConn repeats, getting to the Final Four for the second year in a row, and they will represent the East region in the Final Four. In the West region, the craziest bracket that I have in my bracket, I have number 5 St. Mary's versus number 10 Nevada, in a matchup that's going to surprise a lot of people, but this matchup I think has a lot of excitement behind it, and whoever wins will be considered an underdog in the Final Four, but will have nothing to lose heading into the Final Four. I will go with the St. Mary's Gales. They have played well all season, and I think this is their year to get to the Final Four, make that extra step that they've never done before, and takes down Nevada. But Nevada deserves a lot of credit for being a double-digit seed, a number 10 seed, advancing all the way to the Elite Eight. But I have St. Mary's going to the Final Four. In the South, the number 1 seed Houston against number 3 Kentucky. I think this is where the road ends for Houston. The Cougars will go down to a sharpshooting Kentucky team where I think Reed Shepherd takes over, outscores Houston, and Houston's vaunted defense will be taken down. I think this game will be similar to the Iowa State-Houston Big 12 championship game, and Kentucky and John Calipari advance to the Final Four, their first Final Four since 2015. And in the Midwest, Purdue against Tennessee, the 1 versus the 2. Purdue has a very strong team, but I think Tennessee is stronger overall and plays very good defense. Purdue, under Matt Painter, always seems to get to a certain point in the tournament and then somehow finds a way to blow it. And I think it's the same this year. They play their worst game of the tournament at absolutely the wrong time, and Tennessee takes advantage of that, and Rick Barnes advances to his first Final Four as head coach of the Tennessee Volunteers. So in my Final Four, I have number 1 UConn going back to the Final Four for the second year in a row, number 5 St. Mary's going to the Final Four for the first time, number 3 Kentucky making it to the Final Four for the first time in almost 10 years, and finally number 2 Tennessee advancing to their first Final Four in program history. So in the first matchup in Phoenix, where the Final Four is being held this year, Connecticut versus St. Mary's. St. Mary's, the 5 seed, plays great defense. They're very well coached, very well balanced. I think this is a team, though, that has reached their peak. They really don't have anything to lose, like I said, but because of that, I don't think they come in with the attitude that they're going to knock off Connecticut. Connecticut advances to their second straight national championship game in a game where I think Connecticut wins by 2 or 3 possessions, and St. Mary's down the stretch just runs out of gas and loses to a much more talented team, a much more physical team, and a team that is battle-tested from last year's tournament as well. So number 1 Connecticut, the overall number 1 seed, advances to the national championship game for the second year in a row. And then 2 teams from the SEC who have played each other twice this year already will meet for the third time in the Final Four. Number 3 Kentucky versus number 2 Tennessee. Tennessee won at Rupp Arena, and then Kentucky turned around late in the season and won at Thompson-Boling Arena. So they split road games, both won on the road in the series. Both games were very close, very competitive. I think Tennessee has the slight advantage in this game. They came off a loss to Kentucky in the last game of the regular season, and I think they have revenge on their minds going into this game. It's going to be super close. I know that Calipari and Barnes, it's going to come down to the wire. Neither team will give up, but I give the slight edge to Tennessee to move to the national championship game. So in my championship game, I have number 1 Connecticut against number 2 Tennessee. Connecticut going there for the second straight year. Tennessee going there for the first time in program history, and also the first time that Rick Barnes will appear in the national championship game. This is going to be a great game. The matchups overall are very close, with both teams having pretty good guard play, pretty good size on the perimeter, and solid play around the rim. I think it's going to be a close game, but again, Connecticut and Dan Hurley are going to repeat as national champions. They're going to cut down the nets for the second time in 2 years. Repeat champions the first time since 06 and 07 Florida, and we may be seeing the beginning of a dominant dynasty in college basketball. With the turnover from last year's team to this year's team, losing a handful of players to the NBA and just overall to graduation, Dan Hurley has restocked very well, and I think they will continue to be a team that will be at the top of the bracket for the foreseeable future. So Connecticut is my national champion. I feel pretty strongly about that. If they do go down, it's going to be because they beat themselves. I don't think any team can play better than Connecticut if Connecticut is playing at their top tier. So tomorrow, the first round begins. It's going to be a great tournament. It's going to be filled with great games and great upsets, and it's worth your watch every single game as much as you can over the next 4 days for the first round on Thursday and Friday and the second round on Saturday and Sunday. Well, enjoy basketball, enjoy the games, enjoy the madness, and I will come back with an update as the first weekend goes on. Thank you for listening to the Press Play Podcast Network. To follow us on X, look up Press Play Pods. For sponsorship plans and more information, please email admin@pressplaypodcast.com. And to listen to all our shows and learn more about our network, please visit www.pressplaypodcasts.com.